Are you guys all year 13, year 12s, year 13? What are you?
A mixture.
Mixture of? From where to where?
12 and 13.
Mostly 12 and 13, but we've got a year 9 here as well.
Okay, cool. Righto. Okay. All right. Well, look, so just following up on the introduction there, if you'd asked me 10 years ago, would I end up as Mayor of Queenstown Lakes District, I'd have probably laughed at you. But things change along the way, and one of the good things about life is that new opportunities present themselves, and I like to follow the idea that you should reinvent yourself from time to time. I spent 5 years from 2009 to 2013 inclusive, running Christchurch Airport through the period of the earthquakes and building the new terminal there. But I commuted from here to there, and actually in May of this year, I'll have lived in Queenstown for 40 years. So I feel quite an attachment to this place. And when I came back from Christchurch, I just observed there was some things happening that I didn't like, and there was some things that weren't happening that I thought should happen. And so, you know, you can moan to your friends about what is not happening and what you'd like to happen, or you can stand up and do something about it. And, you know, to be frank, I haven't got too much time for some of the folk who become keyboard warriors and moan all the time. If you want to complain, stand up and do something about it, get involved, but don't stand on the sidelines. So coming forward to leadership, yes, I stood for mayoralty. Surprised myself, there were 5 candidates for the mayoralty in 2016 when I stood, and when I say surprised myself, I surprised myself that I got 53% of the total vote. So you might say, given the other 4 shared 47% between them, I was quite pleased to get a strong mandate from the electorate. Anyway, we're here to talk about leadership, and I've got good news if you don't think that you are particularly a leader at the present point in time. Leadership does come to you with experience. People talk about born leaders. Yeah, there are some people who are probably born leaders. I think leadership comes out of life's experience and the way you treat the opportunities that come your way. So what I want to do today is I want to take you through 8 principles that I think set the scene, set aside good leaders from others. And I want to run those past you, and then I'm happy to take Q&A after that. So first point is the word leader does not have an I in it. Really good leaders don't talk about themselves too much. They try to spread the reflection of what they do amongst the team that they happen to be leading. And I feel a little bit self-conscious coming along here today talking about myself, because I don't really like talking about myself. But you've asked me to talk about leadership, so I guess I have to in this instance. But I hear people saying, I did this, I caused this to happen. Not many people do things on their own. Most people do it with a team. So the first thing I'd ask you to put in your head is that good leaders always reflect their team. When you talk about something being achieved, we did this, we did that. This is our achievement. Second thing the second point is never ask anyone to do something you're not prepared to do yourself. And I'll give you a little illustration of this. When I took on running Christchurch Airport in January 2009, the company had a lot of industrial problems. They'd had I guess I'm going to say poor leadership for a period leading up until then. And they were in danger of having industrial action, having some parts of their staff go out on strike. And one of the groups that were looking like striking were the airport fire service. And an international airport has to have a certain fire capability. It's slightly amusing in that not many airplanes crash at airports, but there's always a requirement to have an airport fire crew. And in an international airport like Christchurch, if the fire service prove inoperable, then the airport would have to close down. So, 2 days after I arrived in Christchurch to run the airport, I got advice that the fire service were planning industrial action. So I thought I'd better go over and meet the guys over at the fire station and see what the problem was. And if you think about being an airport fireman, imagine doing a job that requires you to perpetually train for something you're probably never actually going to do. And that's quite an unusual occupation. These guys had quite a lot of time to think. And don't get me wrong, the training they did was really hard, and they were going to be ready if we did have an accident at the airport. They had a lot of time on their hands to think. They felt undervalued, and it became obvious to me why on my first visit there, when one of them said, "Oh, you're the new CEO. I've been here 9 years and I've never met the CEO before." And I thought, okay, that kind of gives me an idea that these guys have been abandoned over here and ignored for quite a long time. So I said to them, "Look, I'm really interested in knowing what you do, how you train." So they said, all right, they'd schedule a training day and invite me across to take part in it. And we managed to negotiate a stay of execution on the industrial action while this happened. So I went over and I spent a day. They have this concrete block building that they fill with wet wood and then set it on fire. And the effect of that is to fill the building with thick, choking smoke. And it's completely dark. And so you've got to crawl around inside this building, finding your way. And it's about finding orientation in a burning building. So that was all fine. I finished that, thinking, yep, my work here is done. And the guys then said, "Oh, but you need to come back and do a day's hot fire training." And I thought fire was hot no matter what. But anyway, turns out hot fire training is they have a steel mock-up aeroplane fuselage at the airport. Basically a very large steel tube like the fuselage of an aeroplane with holes cut inside of it to replicate windows. And inside it there's vats which contain a mixture of aviation fuel and diesel. And somebody goes through and sets these vats on fire. And so the aviation fuel is to give heat, the diesel is to give plenty of smoke. And then the fire crews have to enter the burning fuselage once it gets nice and toasty and put out the fire. And the crews went through in groups of three, one leading, one making sure that he didn't get into trouble, and the other pulling up the hose behind. So over the course of a day, I went through it 3 times in all 3 different positions. Came out with blisters on my wrists and blisters on my ears. You wear a smoke hood, but towards the end of the day, the smoke hood got wet and the heat caused that to steam and burn my ears. There's a door in the middle of the fuselage, which has a hole in it with flames coming out all around it. And you have to steel yourself to put your hand, obviously in a fireproof suit, through the hole in the door and undo the latch and enter the next compartment. And it's it's a pretty scary experience. But anyway, I came out of that with a very large understanding of the challenge these guys go through and what they would go through if they ever actually had to put out a fire in an aeroplane. And so we kind of went back to the fire station after this and had a cup of tea and had to think about it. And from there on, I went to the fire station every 6 weeks for morning tea, had a chat to them, listened to what their problems were, found some ways I could support them, found some ways in which we could give them other jobs to do around the airport when they weren't fully occupied with training. And we never had a problem after that. And I think the lesson out of that is, as I say, always be prepared to do what you are asking others to do, and you'll be rewarded about what comes out the other side. My third point is talk to everyone. It doesn't matter where people sit in an organization. It doesn't matter whether they're the CEO or whether they clean the restrooms. They're worthy of talking to, and you should take time in what you do to understand everybody. One of the lovely things that happens to me when I do go back to Christchurch Airport these days, and happened to me last Wednesday when I was there, arrived in on the early flight, and I was a bit ahead of my first appointment, and sitting having a cup of coffee, and a little bloke who gathers up the baggage trolleys from around the terminal and takes them to the central part, saw me and came over and sat down and talked to me for 10 minutes. And so I left the airport at the end of 2013. So here we are 9 years later, well, eight and a bit years later, and this guy still felt that he and I were good enough friends that he could come over and tell me about what he's doing and tell me where he's going on holiday and tell me about his family. And so, look, everybody has a story to tell, and you need to take time to understand that everybody is not Einstein. Everybody's not going to be a CEO or a scientist or a doctor or whatever, but everybody plays an important part in society, and you need to take time to talk to them. My fourth point is that you should never be afraid, or good leaders are never afraid of hard decisions. If you find yourself in a leadership position, you will find yourself in a position where you need to make decisions that are unpopular. And everybody wants to be popular. Let's not fool ourselves. It's lovely to be liked. It's lovely for people to say, yeah, gee, what a great person you are, etc., etc. But sometimes you need to make decisions that are really, really difficult, and you know a lot of people are going to be unhappy about them. And I strike that pretty regularly in my current role at the Mayor's office. So I guess I went into the Mayoralty thinking, yeah, I'm pretty sure that I can make all the right decisions and keep most of the people happy most of the time. What I've found is that if you are truly dedicated to your task and you want to do the best for the district, there will come times where you need to do some things that annoy some parts of the community. And so what you've got to do is you've got to think about where you're going to in the longer term. What's the bigger picture? What is really important? It might be a traffic issue. It might be a climate issue. It might be an industrial issue. What is the best thing long term for the community of Queenstown Lakes? And so you get to that position where you need to make that decision, and the very best thing you can do is explain exactly why you're making the decision that you're making, and leave it to the people to decide whether it's right. Now, Unfortunately, that means that your inbox gets filled with a fair bit of hate mail and a fair bit of criticism. But good leaders realise that that comes with the job, and you just have to put it past you. I read this morning's Otago Daily Times, and there was a debate amongst the Dunedin City Councillors over an issue last week, and the commentary in the paper said that it's clear that it's an election year because a whole bunch of people are saying things that are aimed at the electorate. I get really disappointed at that, because if your sole driver in being an elected official is to make popular decisions and popular comments so that you get re-elected, that's pretty sad. And I would hope people would have the guts to carry on doing the right thing, no matter whether it's an election year or not an election year. Fifth point is that I hold the view that leaders always see the glass half full. You need to be positive. There is nothing worse than a leader who is negative and sees the downside in everything. Leaders are people who see the positive. Leaders are the people who impart that positivity to those who they are responsible to, and have goals that are ambitious, that people buy into, and that people want to join into and be part of. Always be the glass half full person. Sounds pretty simple, but there are always people out there who want to find a negative. Forget about it. Put the negatives aside. Be positive. Next point is that really good leaders do a really smart thing, and that is that they hire people who are smarter than them to work for them or to work with them. Smart leaders realise that being surrounded by smart people means that the chances of their decisions being better are a whole lot better. And again, I had this at Christchurch Airport, where I set about hiring the smartest exec team I could find, and we did some absolutely marvellous things at the airport. And that reflected the people who were in my senior leadership team. I started off by telling you the story about the fire brigade. When I joined, the airport company had a system of measuring staff engagement on a regular basis, and basically the measurement came into three levels, which was engaged, those people who were terribly enthusiastic and really wanted to be there. Kind of ambivalent. Yeah, I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be paid. Happy to do my job, but it's not, it's not the reason I get out of bed in the morning. And those who are disengaged, and those who were in the engaged section when I arrived at the airport was less than 10%. I think it was 9.3% or something like that. When I left after marvellous input by the senior leadership team, between engaged and ambivalent, we had 97% of our team on board. So in other words, we only had 3% of our staff who didn't want to be there. And I actually addressed the staff one day and said, we had 300 staff in round numbers. I said, so by my calculations, 9 of you don't really want to be here, and I've done everything I can to make this a good place to be, and my executive team have done the same. And so those 9 people who don't want to be here, can I suggest you go and get another job? Because bottom line is, you're not going to get everybody on board. There's always going to be some people who want to do something different. My 7th point is that good leaders always thank people. And how easy is it to thank people? how easy is it to tap somebody on the arm as you walk past them when they've done a good job and say, well done, oh dear, good job. It's really easy, and you have no idea how much really good feedback you get out of that and how good people feel about themselves if you thank them. I had there's a new owner taken over of the local swimming pool supply company, and I've had this couple of problems with my swimming pool for some years, and this guy's got stuck into it and he's fixed the problems I had. And I was sitting in my office the other day and I thought, this guy's done a really good job, and I rang him up, and I could tell by his voice that he thought I was going to moan over something or other. And I said, look, remain calm, Craig. I'm merely ringing you to tell you you're doing a stunning job. I love having you working as part of the people who help me with stuff. Keep doing what you're doing. And he was sort of speechless. And it's just really easy to help people feel better about themselves. And people who feel better about themselves will do a better job. They will enjoy themselves more. And gee, when you want something else done, they're going to be the first people on the job to do it for you. Final point I'd make, and it's a bit of an odd one, I guess, but it's true, is that most good leaders have egos. Most people who lead are doing so because they want to help other people, but like the issue of saying thanks to people, they get their satisfaction out of helping people, and it makes their ego feel better. But to come back to the point I was making before, they may like their ego being stroked, but they make sure that they shine on others as well, that the team get the recognition for what's being done and what's being done good. Look, that's my 8 points. I suppose the other thing I'd say to you about leadership, and this particularly pertains to the period when I was running Christchurch Airport when we had the earthquakes, and you'll be surprised how people who didn't see themselves as leaders came through that environment and showed leadership skills. So, 2011, February 22nd, 2011, I was in the foyer of the Pratt & Whitney engine rebuilding centre at Christchurch Airport. It was about 10 to 1 in the afternoon, and we had a group of American diplomats visiting the airport, and I was giving a speech to them when the building started to shake, and shake badly. And because we'd had a few earthquakes leading up to this, we were all accustomed to the fact that when that happened, we did the old turtle thing and found something to crawl under or a doorway to stand in or some way of protecting ourselves. And I remember cowering under a table watching the Americans in the room all running out the door. And there was glass flying in all directions and thinking, gee, I wouldn't be doing that. But anyway, it was a fairly sobering day. Fortunately, none of those people were injured. But I jumped in my car and went to the airport emergency ops centre. And earthquakes have this thing where they keep on going afterwards. It's not like a fire that when you put it out, it's gone, or a flood that when the water goes away, it dries out. Earthquakes keep on coming back, and so for the rest of the day and for many days afterwards, we had these aftershocks going on around the place. And the airport, interestingly enough, sits on Christchurch Airport's aquifer. It's potable water supply in a big gravel river seam underneath the airport. So the damage at the airport was a little less than it was in most parts of town, because the water acted as a kind of giant shock absorber and protected our buildings to a large extent. So because of that, a whole lot of displaced people decided the airport was a really good place to come after the earthquakes. And so that night we had some thousands of people in the airport, sleeping on chairs on the floor, etc., etc. We had our own power supply, so we were able to keep our air handling system going, able to keep the lights on. The kitchens and the food places were able to keep a basic amount of food coming. We had our own sewage plant, so we were able to keep the toilets functioning, etc. But what I found is that some of my team responded to this without any prompting and became leaders. And these were folk who might have been employed as gardeners, might have been employed as an engineer, but they suddenly found themselves leading people through this disaster that was happening before their eyes. And never failed to amaze me just how these people suddenly found the leadership gene inside them because of the circumstances they found themselves. So interesting. The airport actually received a very prestigious award, the Jim Collins Award for Aviation Safety, for its preparedness at the time of the earthquake, because we were able to be operational at 10 a.m. the next morning, and that enabled rescue personnel and equipment to be brought into the city, and the airport was actually credited with saving between 20 and 25 lives for people who were extracted out of buildings because of that. So our team did a very good job in being prepared and reacting to it. So look, I could probably talk about leadership all morning, but anyway, there's some initial thoughts. Oded, I'm happy to take questions and comments.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Jim. Can you hear me from back here?
I can hear you, yes.
Awesome. That's great. That means we've got people who have got questions for Mr. Boult. Wants to kick us off. Or
Okay, I have a question. Um,
Sebastian,
at what
go.
point in your at what point in your life/career did you realize you had become a good leader?
That's really interesting. I don't think I've ever thought about that before. I think it was probably after I bought the Shot Over Jet company in the mid 1980s, and we started doing some incredibly good things in tourism. I came by the realization when I bought the Shot Over Jet company that we weren't supplying a jet boat ride, we were supplying a life experience. And we marketed the company as a life experience provider. And suddenly others started following us and emulating us. And I guess, Sebastian, that would be the point where I realized that, yep, I could run a business, but I could also be a leader. And I think, coming back to my original point, that I'm not sure leaders are born, some are maybe. It develops as time goes on. Some get to the realization earlier than others.
Thank you.
When you choose,
Sorry.
when you choose a leadership, what are you looking for in them?
When I choose a leader,
Yeah.
the 8 attributes that I've outlined to you, but there's a lot in people's personality. I should also have, I suppose, if I was able to add in a 9th to my 8th, it would be the way people communicate. Open communication, prepared to hear other people's side of the story, balanced. Look, if there's one skill in life that will take you to a lot of places. It's the ability to communicate, the ability to stand up and talk to people, to have a casual conversation. When I first ended up in the Mayoralty getting interviewed on television, I was probably a bit nervous about it. And then I realised that what I had to do was simply to put my mind in the space that I was simply having a conversation with one of you, and forget about the fact that I was standing in front of a camera. It is simply a conversation with a bunch of people. And so that communication ability is paramount amongst good leaders.
What was the best leadership advice you were given as an emerging leader?
I've got to tell you, nothing sort of sticks out at me, because I don't think I ever saw myself as an emerging leader. I think it just kind of happened. But look, people say things to you along the way in your life that sit in your mind, and some of them, you get told 20 or 30 years ago, and they still sit there. And some of those are really meaningful little guides that you get. I had a wonderful conversation, and this would be 30 years ago, with Tiffany O'Regan, who was a wonderful gentleman. And we were talking, the conversation went to sometimes when people do things that get up your nose, annoy you, or attack you. And Tiffany said to me that his mother gave him a really good piece of advice. And that piece of advice was, forgive your enemies, but take their names. And I always thought that was a really interesting thing to do, because you'll always find people who do something that you don't like, or try to foot trip you along the way. Yep, move on, forget about it. But remember that they might try and do it again sometime. So there's a bunch of things like that. Tiffany also gave me a really good piece of advice, which I've carried forward, which is that people come and go. Ngāi Tahu is forever, and they are. And I have a lot of dealings with them, and that sits well in my mind. Sorry, I can't answer that one particularly well, but I hope that helps.
Folks, just make sure you kind of say your name when you ask your questions. So it's a bit harder kind of through the screen to introduce yourself briefly when you ask a question.
Awesome. Sorry, it's James Gold's talking. I was just thinking back to some earlier questions that were asked and these principles, and I thought I'd ask you, how do you personally define a leader? Is it by following these principles, or is there something else?
Leaders are defined by what they do, and those are my principles. Others may have different principles, but if you look at leaders across the spectrum, how they achieve their goals sets them aside as good or ordinary leaders. And if you look at central politicians, for example, frankly, I wouldn't want to be Prime Minister of our country at the present time. It is just a challenging task, and you can like or dislike the various central government politicians, but I'd prefer to judge them on their ability to achieve. Look at business, and I look at Greg Foran, the current CEO of Air New Zealand, who came into the job like 2 months before COVID arrived. And I said to him in a conversation one day, you must feel like you've been put in charge of the British Army at Dunkirk. It was just falling to bits all around him. And yet he's made stunningly good decisions, in my view, and led the airline through the most challenging time in its period. So good leaders just shine themselves. Good leaders become very apparent. Look on the world stage. I often have debates about American politics for no good reason, not that we have any association with America, but American presidents are a really good example. We've probably all got an opinion about ex-President Trump, but if I go back to presidents who have endured, Barack Obama is certainly one. Go back even further, John Kennedy, despite the fact that he obviously had faults, was an outstanding leader. He could speak and get people to follow him, even those who didn't particularly like him. But I guess I'm looking these days and at the current US president, and he seems to be terribly well educated and understand what he needs to do, but I'm not sure that I am getting enthusiastic about the leadership he's providing. I think he needs to be more definite. He's got a big challenge on his plate at the present time with the Russian situation, and frankly, I wouldn't want to have to solve that, but that will be the making or breaking of him, I suspect.
Morning, Jim. I've got a question
Morning,
for you.
Sam.
You talked about making tough decisions. I was just wondering if you had any examples of tough decisions you've made during your time, and what sort of repercussions career and how you've dealt with those repercussions.
Yep, I'll give you one really good current example. So I live at Lake Hayes, and Lakeside Lake Hayes, not Lake Hayes Estate, but so I've been here since we turned up 40 years ago, and I really love the drive into town along Ladies Mile, and I love that nice rural atmosphere. In the 1990s, Lake Hayes Estate came along, and it was kind of almost divorced from the road because it's down off the edge of the escarpment. And then Shot Over Country came along, and then the retirement village, Shot Over Country, what do they call it? Forgotten what it's called. The old folks' home came along. And now we're faced with the likely development of the northern side of Ladies Mile. To be perfectly frank, I'd rather it was left like it is. I like that rural outlook. But equally, I know that sooner or later it's going to be developed. And if council doesn't permit it to be developed, then the landowners will go to the Environment Court and get their own approval to do what they want to do. And so council's best option is to come up with a master plan and try to steer the development of the northern side of Ladies Mile in a manner that's so it's built in a fashion that is integrated, allows public transport to travel through it, has a shopping centre, has room for schools, etc. And so that's where council is at the present time. And that's something we have to do, but every part of me screams that I'd just much rather it was left alone. So I've had to support the development of a master plan, even though personally I don't want it, because I know it is the right thing to do for the longer term. And so my wife thinks I'm mad for supporting it, and I get plenty of grief from her. But we need to. But I should add the rider. My support is with very much the caveat that there is a better public transport system provided before one house is built over there, because I do not want to see any more congestion on Ladies Mile.
I'm a bit of Tara, and has the values and methods of being a leader changed over time and youth?
Sorry, I didn't pick that up. Can you give me that one again? You're a bit faint.
Sorry, I'm Vinod Bandara, and do you think that the methods and values of leaders have changed over time and healed?
They shouldn't. Good leadership shouldn't matter. Shouldn't be driven by time frames. Yeah, no, the principles of leadership should remain as they are. Look back to World War II, Winston Churchill, not Winston Peters, wash your mouth out, Jim. Winston Churchill, fantastic leader, had his faults, did some things wrong, but he took Great Britain through the most challenging period in its recent last 200-300 years. And his principles, if I think about my 8, he would probably be pretty much in that. I think he would have followed those 8 principles pretty well. We have electronic media these days, of course, which alters the way you communicate, such as I'm doing with you this morning. But I don't think it alters the principles of leadership.
I've got a question. As a leader, what would be your best advice on how to deal with the pressure put on you from people around you?
That's a really interesting question, Liv. So when you become a leader, you immediately open yourself to criticism, and I touched on that in my 8 points. The basic answer to that question, Liv, is if you're doing what you think is right, stick to it and continue to do it and explain why you are doing it. But sometimes I'd have to tell you that the keyboard warriors do get to you. I woke recently to a text message that came in at 3:15 in the morning. And when you get a text at 3:15 in the morning, you're probably going to have a look at it because you're thinking, goodness me, who's died, who's hurt, what's wrong? And the text message was from someone who was blaming me personally for COVID being in New Zealand, and said that I was an F-wit and called me a 4-letter word that starts with C, except that he spelled it with a K, and went on in 3 successive text messages to tell me what a terrible person I was. And interestingly, his last text message read, "I really don't like you." And after reading all of the above, I thought, yeah, I got that message. But, my wife had woken up by this stage and wondered why I was reading text messages at 3:15 in the morning. So she was upset. To come back to your question, if you are a leader and you believe in what you're doing, you just have to ride over those things, ride over the criticism that is unfound, unfair. Listen to valid criticism, listen to fair criticism, but ignore the rubbish. And that's easier said than done. But being a leader, you have to take the bigger view, the higher ground.
Thanks for that.
It's Lee. You mentioned that the shot of a jet was one of your first big leadership experiences, but
Yep.
you leader positions in high school or when you were our age?
No, I didn't. Look, I did a few things, but I wouldn't have put myself in the class of being a leader at high school. I did what I needed to do. but it probably wasn't until I was in my business career that I realised I had some leadership ability. I ended up at 24 years of age as an area manager for quite a large company, and I suppose that's at the point in time I thought I had some ability to lead people. But I guess I'd come back to the point I was making. Maybe one of the first points I made is that if you're not showing leadership skills at school, don't worry about it. Very often they will become apparent as you work your way through life.
Kia ora, Jim, it's Molly. I just wanted to ask you, like, throughout your career, how have you been able to organise and manage your work-life balance?
Really good question. I have an enormously supportive and understanding wife who understands that I usually work maybe 12 hours a day, and probably that's 6 days a week. Unfortunately, the mayoralty is one of those roles where you're never actually not working. It's 24 hours a day, 365 days of the year. You do, however, need time aside for your family, and sometimes that's difficult to do, but you've got to be really disciplined to do that. One of the things I set out to do when I was became a father is that I would, unless I was out of town, I would ensure that I was home in time to read my children a story at bedtime. And that might sound terribly simple and easy and all the rest of it, but I guess I've wanted to ensure that the last thing my children heard before they went to sleep was Dad reading them a story, because Mum had been with them all day or most of the day or whatever. And it's principles like that that you have to adopt if you are going to be a leader, because there'll always be plenty of pressure on your time to go and do other things. I've also got to the stage in council where there are some things you have to say no to. There are some things that you just can't do because you do need a bit of home time, a bit of relaxation time. But gee, that if you figure out what the right balance is, let me know, because I'm still working on it.
Thank you.
One more question, if anybody's got one last question.
Okay. I'm Sophie. So a lot of us are obviously year 13s going on to uni. I was wondering what you studied and how much you think that's helped you along your career.
So there's a really, really interesting question. I didn't go to university. I finished school and decided I didn't want to be a poor student, so I thought I would be an early adopter of the gap year and go and earn some money before I went to uni. I ended up, I tried all sorts of things to earn $1, including being a professional deer colour, a bulldozer driver and other bits and pieces, but I ended up doing a job which gave me an income which was probably the equivalent of what I'd be getting with a degree and a few years experience in the workforce. So I decided I wasn't going to be a poor student after all. So I'm a very poor person to ask that question of, and I'm sorry, my answer is that I never got there. I often reflect on it and think, would it have made a difference to my career? Maybe, maybe not. Having said that, going back to my school days, perhaps a university education was less of a requirement than it is now. And I would certainly encourage you all to either get a university education or take a trade, whichever way you want to go. But that's the two courses I would encourage people to go down.
Hey, Jim, I don't know if you can, hopefully you can hear me, my voice is pretty good. I've just taken 4 pages of notes in terms of kind of some of the things that you've been talking about. Just an absolutely stellar start to our leadership series. I'm not going to say too much. I'll probably get in contact with you separately, but I do want to throw to Alex, who wants to say a couple of words. And I just can't thank you enough for spending the time with us this morning. I really, really do appreciate it. But Alex has got some more.
Cheers, I did.
Hi, I'm Alex. I'd just like to say on behalf of everyone here, a huge thank you for talking to us. I know it's not in person and it's a little bit weird doing everything over Google Meet, but I know for us who are currently in leadership positions or are aspiring to be in leadership positions, we all really appreciate the words that you've said to us from a place of experience and from your great career. So thank you so much, and yeah.
Okay, thank you. Hey, good luck, team. Hope everything goes well for you. And I did great initiative to have these series of discussions, and I hope you continue something out of it. Cheers. Bye.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.